non-probability sample, you should still aim to make it as representative of the population as possible. So this kind of a convenience sampling, they have to face both the sampling bias as well as the selection bias. If the population is hard to access, snowball sampling can be used to recruit participants via other participants. Hello everyone, I am Purnima, faculty in the Department of Commerce and Management, Vidhyaashram First Grade College, Temple of Excellence, MYSURU. I welcome you all to the session. In this Unit 4, Session 2, let us have a discussion on non-probability sampling methods. So in the previous session, I had discussion about the probability sampling methods. Now in this, we will just have a discussion on non-probability sampling methods. So in a non-probability sample, individuals are selected based on non-random criteria, and not every individual has a chance of being included. So in case of a non-probability sampling, so every individual of the population does not have an equal chance of being selected. So in this non-probability, there is no criteria at all. So it is based on a non-random criteria. So you can pick and choose anybody you want. So that is what we call by non-probability. So this type of sample is easier and cheaper to access, but it has a higher risk of sampling bias. So the researcher, he can choose anybody whom he likes, so which gives rise to sampling bias. What is the sampling bias? So it means that the inferences you can make about the population are weaker than with the probability samples, and your conclusions may be more limited. So in case of the non-probability samples, so the inferences you make about the population are weaker than with the probability samples. So in case of probability samples, you are just at random, you are picking the samples, whereas in case of non-probability, there is no randomness. You are purposefully selecting somebody who is quite close to you, or according to your convenience, you are picking up the samples. As a result of which, the results what you are getting, it may be biased. So the conclusions may be more limited. If you use a non-probability sample, you should still aim to make it as representative of the population as possible. So try to see that the non-probability sample, whatever you are collecting, it should be as representative of the population. Try to see that it represents the entire population. So if you can see here, this is the population. So I can pick at random, so 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So this is the kind of a non-probability sampling. So this is the sample which has been chosen without any randomness. So that is non-random criteria. I have just picked up 5 people from this. So this is what we call it as the non-probability sampling. Then non-probability sampling techniques are often used in exploratory and qualitative research. So in these types of research, the aim is not to test a hypothesis about a broad population, but to develop an initial understanding of a small or under-researched population. So this kind of a non-probability sampling techniques, they are often used in exploratory and qualitative research. So in these types of researches, there is no test of hypothesis, and as such, but to develop an initial understanding of a small or under-researched population. Now, this kind of a non-probability sampling, it is usually used to develop an initial understanding of a small or an under-researched population. So, if the population is very small and if it is under-researched, that there are no studies are based on that population, then in such kinds of research, we can make use of this non-probability sampling. Then, in this non-probability sampling, the first type is the convenience sampling. Now, what is this convenience sampling? A convenience sample simply includes the individuals who happen to be most accessible to the researcher. That is, if the researcher is quite close, his close friends, they themselves become the object of the sample. This is an easy and inexpensive way to gather initial data, but there is no way to tell if the sample is representative of the population. So, his close friends and relatives, they all form the sample, and we just cannot say that whether they are the actual representation of the population. So, it cannot produce generalizable results. Convenience samples are at risk of both sampling bias and selection bias. So, this kind of a convenience sampling, they have to face both the sampling bias as well as the selection bias. So, the basis of selection also is biased and the sampling is also biased. So, this whatever the inferences we get from this kind of a convenience sampling, they cannot be generalized. Then the next one, so the example, convenience sampling, you are researching opinions about student support services in your university. So after each of your classes, you ask your fellow students to complete a survey on the topic. So this is a convenient way to gather data, but as you only surveyed students taking the same classes as you at the same level, the sample is not representative of all the students of your university. So, here is an example for convenience sampling. So, if you are researching on opinions about student support services in the university, so what happens is, you instead of going and collecting the opinions of the entire students of the campus, you are just collecting the opinions of only your batch of students. So, what happens is, the other inferences or opinions of other students of the same campus, that is not come into the research. So, as a result of which, whatever the sample you are correcting, it will be just representing the opinions of only your class of students, and the opinions of the other students in the entire campus, they are left out. So, this is what we mean by sampling bias. Then next one is voluntary response sampling. Similar to convenience sample, a voluntary response sample is mainly based on ease of access. So, instead of the researcher choosing participants and directly contacting them, people volunteer themselves, example by responding to a public online survey. So, what is this voluntary response sampling? So, there is an example here. So, if there is a public online survey, then most of the people would want to voice their opinion on that particular topic, and they will answer the online survey. So, this is what we mean by voluntary response survey. So, anybody can express their view on the given topic. So, that we call it as the voluntary response sampling. So, this is mainly based on ease of access. See, voluntary response samples are always at least somewhat biased, as some people who will inherently be more likely to volunteer than others, leading to self-selection bias. Now, in this kind of a voluntary response bias, so it has to face the self-selection bias. Then, the next, in this, the example is the voluntary response sampling. You send out the survey to all students at your university, and the lot of students decide to complete it. This can certainly give you some insight into the topic, but the people who responded are more likely to be those who have strong opinions about the student support services. So, you can't be sure that their opinions are representative of all the students. So, in this kind of a voluntary response, suppose again the same example you are carrying forward. So, if you are having a research on the student support services in the university, then if it is open for all the students of the university, then those people who are very strong and who want to just have their voice heard, so they will be responding, whereas those others, they don't want to share their opinion, they just keep quiet. So even then, this kind of a survey can be one-sided. Then purposive sampling. So this type of sampling is also known as the judgment sampling. It involves the researcher using their expertise to select a sample that is most useful to the purposes of the research. So in this kind of a judgment sampling, the researcher tries to use his judgment to decide on the sample. So it is often used in qualitative research, where the researcher wants to gain detailed knowledge about a specific phenomenon rather than make statistical inferences, or where the population is very small and specific. So in this kind of a judgment sampling, it is usually used in qualitative research or where the population is very small. So they can make use of it. And then an effective purposive sampling must have clear criteria and rationale for inclusion. Always make sure to describe your inclusion and exclusion criteria and beware of observer bias affecting your arguments. So in this kind of a purposive sampling, so you try to include somebody and exclude somebody. So where you have to give a reason, so why you have included somebody and why you have excluded somebody. So in this way, you can see that there is no observer bias in the research. Then the next one, in this purposive sampling, you want to know more about the opinions and experience of disabled students at your university. So you purposefully select a number of students with different support needs in order to gather a varied range of data on their experience with the student services. So in this kind of a purposive sampling, suppose you are having a research on students with a different ability. So differently abled students. So you are having a research on that. So that will be a small group of people, and you try to pick and choose from this group of people. So that becomes purposive sampling. So the next we have the snowball sampling. If the population is hard to access, snowball sampling can be used to recruit participants via other participants. So you recruit participant 1, participant 2, participant 3. So they are the participants. You collect information from all the 3 of them. So then in the next step, you ask each one of them to give 3 references. So each one of them will give you 3 references. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Now, again, you collect information from all of this 9 of them. So then you collect more information. Then again, each of them will give 3 references. Now, from each of them, you ask them 3 references. Again, from them you are collecting the information. So in this way, what happens is, from a group of 3 people, your population will start growing, your sample will start growing, and it will snowball into a very huge number. So the number of people you have access to snowballs as you get in contact with more people. So first you started with 3 people, then you have 9 people, then again you will have again so many people. So in this way you will have more and more people to ask for the information. Downside here is also the representativeness. Now, what is the downside here? So the reference what each of them give, they may not truly represent the population. So you have no way of knowing how representative your sample is due to the reliance on participants recruiting others. This can lead to sampling bias. So when you are asking the references from each of them, so the references which they give, they may not be representative of the sample. Example, snowball sampling. You are researching experiences of homelessness in your city. Since there is no list of all homeless people in the city, probability sampling isn't possible. So you may meet one person who agrees to participate in the research, and she puts you in contact with other homeless people that she knows in the area. Now, an example for for snowball sampling is, suppose there is a research going on about homeless people in the city, so people who don't have any homes. So what happens, you just meet somebody at random, so you just ask them about their experience, and then you ask him whether he knows somebody else who is homeless. So in this way, he will give you a reference, and from that you just start improving your contacts. So in this way, you can see that you collect more and more information from that particular area of research. Then in multi-stage sampling or multi-stage cluster sampling, you draw a sample from a population using smaller and smaller groups at each stage. So in the multi-stage sampling, so first if you have 1, 2, 3 samples, then next you will be having 5 samples, then it will be again more and more. So this is what we mean by smaller and smaller groups at each stage. So this method is often used to collect data from a large geographically spread group of people in national surveys. For example, you take advantage of hierarchical grouping, that is from state to city, to create a sample that less expensive, time consuming to collect the data from. So in this way, you take advantage of hierarchical groupings, that is from the state to the city to the neighborhood. So in this way, we can create a sample. So with this, we come to the end of this session. Hope you have all followed it. Thank you.